I got a pretty good advance, but like a pretty good advance for a book, but not a lot of money for travel. The travel ended up costing about $20,000 on its own, I think, maybe more, actually. So I supplemented that with grants.
Today's guest wrote a travel memoir, and he was scrappy and fortunate enough to find extra funding to cover the many trips he had to take around the world. Omar Mouallem wrote Praying to the West, How Muslims Shaped the Americas. But he found it was hard to tackle that subject matter as a casual observer. He had to find a new relationship with the religion he grew up with and had grown apart from.
Now, when I really started to become a character in my own book with kind of an arc that I was setting out to, explore, it was one of my earlier trips. I went to Trinidad and I kept being greeted and treated like a Muslim brother and kind of expected to pray with people, and I found that people were opening up to me because they thought I was, a pious Muslim person and not necessarily as like a journalist, more like just like a curious brother. And I felt very conflicted about that. So I felt like I needed to be more, after that, I felt like I really need to be a lot more transparent with my subjects, but I especially needed to be more transparent with my readers.
Omar dives into the whole process, from getting his start as a ghostwriter to how he landed his book deal, casting his mosques, the editing process with Simon & Schuster, some really insightful tips for writers, and more in today's episode. There's nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed. Welcome to The Bleeders, a podcast and support group about book writing and publishing. I'm writer and podcaster Courtney Kosak, and each week I'll bring you new conversations with authors, agents, and publishers about how to write and sell books.
Hi, my name is Omar Mouallem. I am a journalist, documentary filmmaker, and the author of Praying to the West, How Muslims Shaped the Americas.
So I actually know Omar because I taught a few workshops for his pandemic university. So he's watched me teach podcasting, but this was our first time sharing the mic.
It's nice to get a chance to experience the Courtney Kosak podcast experience. I'm excited about this. I took our daughter out to a movie yesterday, a new movie, and she asked the most profound question. She asked, why do they keep making movies when there are so many movies I haven't seen? And it's like, yeah, why do we keep writing books when there are so many books we already haven't read?
Okay, well, people have more things to say. So funny that Omar's daughter is making grown adults question their career path with her philosophical question. We're fragile. Please don't come for our life decisions. Anyway, Omar wrote a very interesting and worthy book that we're going to get into. But first, the 5 questions. When did you first identify as a writer?
I think I might have been as young as like 7 or 8. I have a very distinct memory of folding up pieces of paper, big pieces of paper, into these like 6-page folded comic books that I would write. And they were mostly words because I was never a good drawer. So there was just a couple of pictures on there, and then trying to sell those to my friends and neighbor friends. And one of them, this was probably the first reality dose as a writer. One of them told me that their father advised them, because I think I was trying to sell them for $2, that their father advised them that they should not pay more than a quarter for my book.
That's how valuable your art is, sir.
And you know what? They were right. They were right. That was good fatherly advice.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so you started young. What is your all-time favorite book?
It's funny, I don't feel like I have a very strong connection to a single book, not the way that I do with movies and music. And
Really?
yeah, no, I get asked this question and I never have a proper answer. And I was just asked it last week. I was teaching at a youth writing camp and we wrapped up on the fifth day and I was like, okay, AMA time. I thought they wanted to talk about craft and stuff. And they were like, what's your favorite book? What books do you love? I was like, oh God, this again? I think if I were to pick one, probably 1984. George Orwell's 1984. And only because I think that was the first book that I read where I felt like I was having a profound reading experience and where I understood the, I guess, commentary in a book, how you can tell a story while also making commentary on the world and on life. And that one resonates with me. So I think that's probably, and it's also maybe the one book I've read more than once.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
I like that answer. What's your dream writing routine? Money's no object, time is no object. What's the fantasy?
So first of all, I'm not living in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
No,
Yeah,
you're
no.
the son of Alberta.
I know. I know. I'm probably living like, I don't know. I'm probably living in Mexico somewhere. Like,
Okay.
doesn't need to be coastal, maybe Mexico City, maybe somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere warm and where I can be outside to work. That's the important thing. I want to be comfortably outside to work. And then I think it would involve me waking up early as I always do, but actually getting to work within like the first hour and a half of waking up, and then not having to read a single email
Oh,
until
yes.
maybe the end of the day,
Oh,
and just writing and reading and writing and reading, because reading is writing, and jotting down notes and scribbling out, different structures of different sections, experimenting with that, picking up the phone to call someone to clarify something or to get some quick research, and they pick up. They pick up on the
Ooh.
first ring.
this is a good fantasy.
Oh my God. It's amazing. And they always have time for me. That's the crazy
Yes.
thing. They always have time for me. And they're never evasive. There's no question that is off the record or that they, don't want to be asked. And then I think that, probably around 1:00, go for a jog, come back, shower, eat, get back to work at about 3. And I work till about 6 and day's over. No more emails. Even when I check for emails, there's no new ones.
Email's illegal.
Email
Not
is
in
illegal.
a bad way, but just like we don't have it.
Yeah, that's probably my dream routine. Yeah.
What is your real writing routine? And I've been talking to some parents lately, so I'm curious how much your
Yeah.
kids factor into this.
A fair bit, I think. My real writing routine, honestly, is, other than the tropical part of it and the email part of it, it's not that far off. Maybe it is far off. I mean, my real writing routine is I do wake up early, but I don't usually start working until about 9. And unfortunately, the first thing I do is, check emails and messages and get caught up on all that stuff. And that could take me till 1:00 sometimes. And then I go for a jog and I think about what I want to write, and I do a lot of planning. And sometimes if I need to revisit interviews, I'll listen to my interviews on my jog. Or if I'm picking up where I left off, I might take everything that I've written up to that point, all the text, copy it, paste it into like a text to MP3 file, and I'll listen to it, which is a weird thing to be listening to while you're jogging, working up a sweat, but it works. And then, get cleaned up and try to work until 6 or 7. I used to be able to go pretty hard. I used to be able to just go, have dinner and keep going, stay up really late. But that I have kids now, and it's totally different. I have a great office. Like
Are you in your office right now?
I am, yeah. I work with two monitors, two big monitors, and the reason that I do that is because I like to have like word processor transcripts.
Oh, yeah.
All like one monitor is just research and one is just my word processor, and I love that. And so I do like to work from my office, but I also have like ADHD and need to change my environments quite frequently.
Uh-huh.
So I work out of libraries a lot. I probably change environments at least once a day. And I want to say it's, because of the kids, but honestly, it's not because of the kids. It's just like before the kids existed, I was doing this too.
Is it just pandemic, you and your creative work? Like, is that all you have to juggle?
No, not at all.
Is there a whole nother job?
Yeah, kind of. Like I teach and am a mentor to creative nonfiction writers at the University of King's College in Halifax. I just accepted another teaching job, so I'll be teaching another course in the fall. I have Pandemic University, obviously, that I run, have a good team there, but I also teach there as well. I am always probably working on one article and then one big project. So that was the book before, and right now it's a documentary.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I relate to that.
Yeah. I mean,
Kind
I'm
of
a
juggling.
freelancer. Yeah. But like, I love it. Like, it's a hustle, but that's not just the life I chose, but it's the life that I want. Yeah, I love having lots of stuff on the go until it overwhelms me and it becomes a burden and and I'm just kind of a distractible, burnt out mess. But when the balance is there, it's great. I mean, and I think, coming back to having ADHD, I think that I thrive in this kind of I thrive with this kind of situation because I always seek out novelty and luckily I always have it.
Uh-huh. Totally. Okay, what is one piece of writing that makes you jealous you didn't write it?
There is a great book called Boys, What It Means to Be a Man Today, a great nonfiction book about sort of the idea of manhood and how we shape good men from the time that they are boys. It's a wonderful book, and it's something that I think about a lot, especially more so now that I have a son as well. But it was something that I thought about a lot for years, just dealing with my own stresses. And I made a documentary about men's mental health a few years ago as well. So it's something it's a topic that I've been very interested in for a long time. It's a wonderful book. And the author, Rachel Giza, who's a friend of mine, is just the perfect writer for it. And I say that because this book was based on, this book was based on an article that she wrote for the Walrus magazine cover story.
Oh.
And the idea and the program for boys that was sort of at the center of it, it was an idea that I had as well. And I was planning to pitch it to the Walrus. And I sat on it and I sat on it and I sat on it. And then like almost maybe 2 years later, never doing anything about it, saw that someone else
somebody
wrote
idea.
it. They exactly right. And for the same magazine that I wanted to write it for. And I didn't know Rachel at the time. And so I was legitimately jealous. Legitimately.
I love that.
And then I read the piece and then I read the book. And this is coming back to like why she's the perfect person to write it. I wasn't even a parent at the time. She was a parent of an adopted boy. She's a woman. She's a lesbian married to another woman, and they adopted this boy, and they were trying to raise him, with their values, and we're kind of navigating this world in a very, very unique way. And it just gave her such a unique perspective. And she really was the perfect person to write that book. And so, yeah, I'm happy she did.
I love that story. That's maybe the best one yet.
And we became friends after that book came out, and I had a chance to meet her. So.
So before we really dig into the book, we're going to take a brief detour to talk about Omar's rap career. But just trust me, it's worth it. So Very early in the book, you apologize, I guess, or sort of for your sins as a rapper. When did you first identify as a rapper? I was like, oh my God, I love this.
Here are the rap questions. Yeah, I mean, I started rapping probably when I was like 12, 13, recording on cassettes. And then, I had a little rhyme book with some really, really like obscene things in it. I remember my mom finding it once and just being horrified and kind of destroyed. And oh man, I forgot about that memory for maybe 20 years until right this very moment. I think I was so scared that I started crying. Anyhow,
You were like, this is not who I am. This is a different version.
it was, yes. Like, you don't understand performance art. Yeah, I was undeterred. In high school, I figured out how to like record audio and download instrumentals. First of all, I learned that instrumental beats like existed, like beats of like my favorite rap songs existed, and you can download them on Napster. Wow, what an invention. And so I just like went out and started recording songs. And I think like by the 9th grade, I had like an LP recorded. I would burn these CDs and figured out how to like print little CD labels and did like a cover and the back. And I must have sold like 30 to 50 of those in junior high.
I love that.
Well, here's the thing. It also means that there's like 30 to 50 of those out there in existence. And that is the scariest. That keeps me up at night, Courtney.
That is so funny. What were you rapping about?
Oh my God. I was rapping about what rappers rapped about. I was using the N-word. Like it was, it's bad. Yes, no, it's bad. It's bad. Look, I was like
you
a weird,
sold
I know, I was a 14-year-old
40 to
kid.
50
I
bombs
know. Yes, exactly. No, they
future.
exist. They exist. There's at 30 to 50 ways to cancel me right now if they want.
You know what? That's beautiful, though. You're like, this is out there. I sort of have to own it.
I have to own it. You know what? On my first like actual album that I like had printed and was semi-studio recorded, I think I had the foresight to address that in a song. So anyway, yeah, 14-year-old weird kid, one of the only like immigrant families in a small Alberta town with like 3,000 people who,
right,
just didn't fit in any way. Also like would watch and rewatch Spike Lee's Malcolm X all the time and would do like Malcolm X impressions. And I just really thought that I was the blackest kid in town. Really, really did. And, maybe to an extent I was.
I know there is something in that though. But oh my God, all of this is so fucking funny. When did you grow out of it? And we're like, oh my God.
I grew out of it probably like the very next year. I don't know. I mean, grew out of the like, the
hardcore phase.
No, the wannabe black kid,
Yeah.
But I continue to rap and, I continue to record, music. And it's been 10 years since my last album, 10 years since I was a rapper. Last week, I did come out of rap retirement to perform in the youth camp's talent show. I was teaching at a youth writing camp, and there was a contractually obligated instructor talent show that I initially tried to get out of, but again, it was contractually obligated. And I didn't know what else to do, so I quickly, found one of my old beats and did a song, and the kids didn't hate it.
Give me just a couple lyrics.
Oh God. Okay, so it's like it's like my attempt at like a club song for girls, like a body positive club song for girls. And the hook is, my wife wrote the hook, is when life gives you mascara, make masquerade.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, you gotta
With the right beat, I imagine it.
It works. It's like, it starts with like, ooh, okay, the makeup store MAC?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's called MAC face. And it starts with like, ooh, she's got her MAC face on. Can't take off the mask till the mascara is gone. Buxom blonde with bucks to blow. Swarovski crust on her bra, to the bar she goes. She's knee deep in books, sleeps with texts, cause degrees won't earn themselves, so eats sashimi with her number 2 pencil. It's her number 1, then shoot for creme de nude. I'm not gonna keep going.
Okay. Well, that officially concludes our rap portion. That was lovely.
I think it does, doesn't it?
Okay, so Praying to the West, what's the premise?
So Praying to the West is a travel memoir about the lost and ignored and sometimes erased history of Muslims in the Americas. So I grew up Muslim, don't practice it. Islam, haven't for a long time, but have always had sort of a cultural connection to it. And around 2015, 2016, when Islamophobia became, quite mainstream with the rise of Trump and other, right-wing populists in the Western world, I wanted to address it, but I wanted to address it in a reported way. And I thought that, if only people knew how far back Islamic history went in the Western world, and particularly in the Americas, that the Muslim presence here is as old as any non-Indigenous faith, non-Indigenous culture. If people knew that, maybe they wouldn't have so many reasons to fear it, if they understood just how it has influenced society, Western society already. And I thought that the best way to do that would be to travel to sort of important Muslim communities in the Americas. So I started in Brazil and went up to the Arctic, two very unlikely places for there to be Islamic history and mosques. And I tell the story through existing mosques today and why they exist and the people who built them, the influence that they've had, and the influence too that the regions have had on their communities as well. And along the way, I sort of, I deal with my own complicated relationship with Islam and with organized religion in itself.
Yeah, I mean, I super related to that part of the book because, I mean, I feel like that with Catholicism, and I kind of have never been, outside of the cultural stuff, attached to the religion at all. And so anyway, I found that very relatable.
I think it's relatable for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people who leave their religions just kind of gradually and not because of some sort of traumatic experience will often find themselves coming back to those traditions because they mean something to them. And they are also a way to connect with their families. And that's, for me, that's really what it ultimately is. It's a way for me to connect with my family.
So I'm curious, what year did you start the whole process? I want to talk about the book proposal and then also, and maybe this all ties together, but you have an author's note at the beginning and it kind of lays out the rules or the way that you're thinking about the book. And I'm curious how much of that was in the initial proposal. Were you this is straight reporting? Were you a piece of it initially? And did you plan on tackling your faith in that way? Or is that something that happened, during the process?
This is a great question. So I would say that, the first trip, there's about 13 trips that I took for it. The first trip was in March 2017. That was in the Arctic. And the last one was to Bahia, Brazil. And that was in December 2019. So I kind of did it backwards over 2.5 years. I mean, I did it out of order, basically. And I knew that I was going to insert my opinions in the book. I knew it was going to be a first-person book. I do first-person journalism generally. But I did not think that it was going to be a memoir until probably the last couple drafts of the book proposal. And yeah, and I don't remember exactly why, but I think I just felt like historical nonfiction can be a difficult thing to relate to people unless you can show them how it relates to you.
Hmm.
And ultimately, I mean, I think that using first person narratives, it just kind of gives people like a vehicle, a vessel to sort of live the story through. Now, when I really started to become I guess, a character in my own book with more of with kind of an arc that I was setting out to, I guess, explore, it was one of my earlier trips. I went to Trinidad and I kept being greeted and treated like a Muslim brother and kind of expected to pray with people. And I found that people were opening up to me because they thought I was, a highest Muslim person and not necessarily as like a journalist, more like just like a curious brother. And I felt very conflicted about that. So I felt like I needed to be more, after that, I felt like I really need to be a lot more transparent with my subjects, but I especially needed to be more transparent with my readers and let them know sort of where I'm coming from, what my biases are, why I have these biases. And that ultimately led me to explore more of my, personal experiences growing up in the faith.
So the book proposal process, how did that evolve?
I mean, I knew that I wanted to write a book. I'd ghostwritten 2 books already with Simon and
really?
Schuster. Yeah. And they really liked working with me. And they were basically like, okay, what do you want to write now? We're interested in publishing one of your books. And so it was quite a privileged opportunity. I worked with my agent on a couple of ideas, and that's how this came about. Like I told her what I was interested in and what I wanted to do and what I want to set out to do. And I had an idea of writing about Islamic history in Canada, actually. And she was like, too small. Like, you have this opportunity to sell an international, to sell a book to Simon and Schuster and tell an international story. She was like, why not America, or North America rather? I was like, well, why not the Americas? So yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it started. And I probably spent about 2 or 3 months doing historical research and putting together maybe the first draft of the book proposal, and it went through 7 drafts before it went to the publisher. And we only sent it to the one publisher because they gave me a great offer, and that was that.
Nice. So the travel part of it, you visited like 40 to 50 mosques and then honed in on like 13.
13 of them, yeah.
So how did you cast your mosques? And what were the travel logistics of that? And I guess you knew that it was going to be set up, so there was some funding. And did you have to supplement that? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, I got a pretty good advance, but like a pretty good advance for a book, but not a lot of money for travel.
Right.
The travel ended up costing about $20,000 on its own, I think, maybe more actually. So I supplemented that with grants. I don't know what the situation is like in other countries, but in Canada,
not as good, I can tell you that.
Yeah, we have a lot of funding sources for the arts. I mean, it comes from our inferiority complex with America and this perpetual fear of Canadians that we will not have any culture because American culture is so dominant that we have to subsidize it. And we also have to restrict the amount of American content that is on our airwaves and in our, I don't want to say in our bookstores, but maybe there are rules against certain percentages. I don't know. But basically, there is a decades-long effort at every branch of of government here to support and encourage the development of Canadian arts. And that's why we have all these grants. So I was able to secure about $20,000 from 3 separate branches of government and sort of arts councils.
God bless Canada. That is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who has received $70,000 so far to write her first novel, like what will be her first published novel. Now, I mean, it's an amazing idea and it's an important book, and she obviously has been writing some incredible excerpts and outlines in order to get this funding. But yeah, I mean, it exists.
Damn.
So yeah. So that's how I did that. As far as picking the mosques, it was a mix of sort of, I guess, triage and triangulation. I knew that, some mosques, believe it or not, are kind of famous. So the first mosque in Canada, which is actually here in Edmonton, is one of those famous ones. The Islamic Center of America in Dearborn, which is sort of seen as like the Middle Eastern and Muslim hub of America, also another famous one. It's one that like Washington sends diplomats to in order to improve Muslim relations. So there are some mosques like that where it's like, yes, those, I want to know their stories and tell their stories. Other times it was like, in Trinidad, I went there. I probably went to 10 different mosques, and I was looking for one that best represented the story of that country. And that country's like Muslim population. Other times I just kind of like stumbled upon this in my research, and I was like, yes, I need to get there. So that would be the mosque of an indigenous Mayan community in southern Mexico that I was not expecting. I was like, I need to be there. And then, situations like that would make me decide also what some of the redundancies were. So there's a mosque in Argentina that I wanted to go to, but it was a little redundant of the Mexican one. So that's kind of how I cast them, I guess.
So then, are you writing as you go, or did you wait until the research was done and then plow through a draft? How did that work?
I tried to write as I go because, each chapter could have been its own book, and it was a lot of information to hold in my head. And I knew that I could not possibly retain this information very well. I'm also like, no matter how many notes I take,
right,
I will forget, what's in my notes. And I just end up having to like do the research again. So I did my best to avoid that. And it went well for the first while, and then it all fell apart, and I ended up writing probably the last half of the book after my last trip, after, returning from Brazil, which, it made things really difficult. But at that point, I didn't have a choice. I was, it's what I had to do. But if I could do it again, I'd give myself more time. I would have avoided distractions, articles, assignments, any other things that came up. I think I made a documentary in that period. So, no regrets there. That was my first film, but I think I just would have just given myself more time to make sure that there was like maybe 3 months between each, trip and draft. I didn't need a clean draft, but, I needed probably like, a month of research before the trip, a week of the trip, probably 2 to 3 more weeks of like more research and outlining and transcribing and note taking, and then a month of writing for each chapter. So if I could do it again, that's what I'd do.
Yeah, that's smart. But I mean, I get it. We travel for private parts unknown, and sometimes you just can't control all the other stuff that is going on in your life. So,
and it's also kind of an episodic book. It can be read out of order. Right. And each chapter doesn't connect so closely to the next. So, but other books, books with more tighter narratives, you probably can't do that.
So you finish a draft that you send to Simon & Schuster. What was the editing process?
Yeah, it changed. It started with like edits on the first couple of chapters that I delivered, just to kind of like set the tone, make sure that we all sort of agreed on like the right structure and kind of finding a bit of a blueprint for each chapter. And then once that was done, then I was just I kept sending things along as they came, but I was receiving them in big chunks. And I think like at the end, it was like the last 4 remaining chapters just kind of all came together. And then it was a little bit more, contained after that, where it was like edits on like a full draft going back and forth, but it was all bits and pieces, totally out of order until that point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, how long? I think I heard you say like it was supposed to take one and it took 3 years or whatever. Like,
Oh,
how long
yeah.
was the process?
Yeah, I think I must have signed that book deal in summer. I want to say summer or fall of 2017. And I seem to remember a year or maybe a year and a half deadline from that point. And yeah, no.
You were like, I'm still traveling. So,
Yeah, a year. Yeah, I was. I was still traveling at that point. I got some extensions, and then COVID hit and that delayed things as well. Probably added another 6 months.
but you're like sending them chapters
Yeah, I'm
so they know
working.
you're working. They're not worried about it.
Yeah, and you know what? That's honestly that's part of the reason to also send chapters, piecemeal like that.
That's a good hack.
Yeah, it's a good. Yeah.
Buys you 2 extra years. That's
Yeah.
okay. So I'm curious about the fact checking process for a book like this.
Yeah. Fact checking in books doesn't really exist unless you as an author make it exist. And this is one
Really?
of the this is one of the things I struggle with the most in publishing. One of my first jobs in the industry was as a fact checker for a magazine. I was an intern, but like probably 50% of my job was fact checking. It's something that I don't just take it seriously, but I actually take joy in it. And I just have so much respect for the fact checking process. So it was quite discerning to realize, not with this book, but with the first couple books that I ghost wrote, that there was no fact checking process. There's a copy editing process, and in that they might check the spellings of things or
Mhm.
correct geography, something like that. But no one's looking at your sources. And so I asked for a fact checker and time to fact check. And
Uh-huh.
my publisher, they were so accommodating this whole process. They assigned one of their editorial interns to do about half the fact checking, all sort of like the low hanging fruit,
Uh-huh.
that they could fact check by checking for sources online. And then I spent about $1,000 to hire a fact checker, a professional journalist, and a friend of mine. She probably deserved $2,000 for it. She fact checked sort of the higher hanging fruit, the stuff that you might actually need to call someone
Uh-huh.
and say, like, what did you mean by this? Did you actually say this? Can you confirm this? That kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I believe that fact checking should be done independently of the writer, but if I didn't have the money for that, and if the publishers didn't have the resources for that, I would have to do it myself. A book with a topic this sensitive, I would not be able to. I just wouldn't be able to sleep. And look, there were errors
Really?
in every chapter. Of course. I've been a fact checker. I know that there has never been an article. I think there's never been an article that I fact checked over, say, 500 words that did not have an error in it. Everything has an error in it, like everything that hasn't been fact checked has errors in it. I can say this categorically because I've seen it. I know it.
You're so right, because sometimes, okay, I'll do like a radio story or whatever, and just in the handing over process, just in me turning it over to the digital team or whatever, even if everything's right on my end, there will just be like, this is 4 people running down the green and it's really 3 people, or you know what I
Totally.
mean? Just
Yeah.
in that process, I'm like, oh my God, you're so right. Everything has an error.
Everything. You have to have a second pair of eyes to comb through it. We don't really have those resources in publishing anymore. Newspapers never really did this because newspapers, they can run a correction the very next day. I think magazines, which would print, weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, biannually, they have always been extra cautious about this and invested in that, but less and less so these days. I think they are maybe using their online platforms as a bit of a crutch to excuse cutting their fact-checking resources because they can now also correct things immediately when they learn them, which is great. But also, what about the printed version that's sitting on the, in the doctor's office for the next 2 years?
That is very interesting. I saw that there's no Audible yet, so I want to know if you're going to be voicing
Oh God,
the
I hope so.
audiobook.
But I got to tell you something amazing. I learned recently that the first book I ever wrote, called Amazing Cats.
I love it.
Are you familiar with this book?
No, but I love the title. I'm already on board.
In 2008, I wanted desperately to be a writer. I was searching Craigslist for jobs, and I found a job that said something like, looking for writers to write true stories about cats. It's like, okay, hi. I've published a couple articles, and this is it.
That is amazing.
It's called Amazing Cats, Stories of Intuition, Compassion, Mystery, and Extraordinary Feats. I found out by accident 2 months ago in May, I found out that they made an audio version of that book last fall. I don't know why. 13 years later, they would make an audio version of that book. I'm curious. I think I'm owed royalties, so I'm going to have to look into that.
Oh my God, I'm going to have to go check that out. I'm going to have to listen to Amazing Cats.
So yeah, Praying to the West, not on Audible yet. Amazing Cats on audible.com. You can get it with your free credit.
So wait, are there plans for an audiobook for Praying to the West?
Currently, no. No, we're working on the plans for the paperback version.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a slow rollout.
Yeah.
Okay. So your book came out during COVID. What was the book tour experience like and the reaction?
Yeah, the reaction was great. I got really positive reviews and feedback right out the gate. And, I felt super lucky and grateful for that. But, there wasn't really, there was a virtual book tour, which was busy. But it was also a virtual book tour, right? And it was in September, October, November of 2021. So, by then people were pretty Zoom fatigued.
Right.
And so they just weren't coming out to online events as much. So, it was quiet. Like, it was fine. I had some great conversations. It also really worked out for me personally and for my family personally, because it meant that I could do this all from home at a very busy time. My last documentary came out at the same time in September of 2021. So it was nice to be home for that. But I didn't actually go travel for my first book festival until last May, until May 2022. And that was wonderful. They treated us so well. And I was like, oh my God, I really missed out on the author experience. I really, really missed out on it. And I was so happy, but I was also a little bit sad, and kind of sad for younger writers too, those ones who do have the energy and maybe the, excuse to travel and have so much to benefit from that experience, who didn't get to have it on their on their first books. There's always going to be more books. Hopefully there will be more experiences, book tour experiences. But it was a bittersweet thing. I went to the Fold Festival, the Festival of Literary Diversity in the Metro Toronto area in Brampton. And so it was a bittersweet experience. They sent the authors to the airport in a limo.
Oh,
they were really we were like sick kids. They treated us like sick kids who'd just come out of the Ronald McDonald house. They were like, oh, they've been through so much during this pandemic. They really deserve this,
That's sweet though.
It was so sweet.
I saw that you've gotten to go to some award shows. I think you won recently.
Yeah, I recently was awarded one of the Lieutenant Governor of Alberta's Emerging Artists Awards.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And the very next day received the Wilfrid Eggleston Nonfiction Prize, which is the top nonfiction prize in the province for Praying to the West.
Amazing. Your parents and your family look super proud of you. So that was adorable.
Looks can be deceiving.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. They are. And I'm super grateful to have like such supportive family members. People have, when people ask me like, how'd you write this book? It was such a daunting effort. It's like, yeah, I married like an extremely supportive person and have like a really supportive mother who looked after our kids when I was away for 25% of my child's first 2 years on Earth. It meant a lot. Actually, when I won the Wilfred Eggleston Award, I went up there with like, another planned speech, and I just started my I brought my daughter. She was my plus one, and as I went up there, I looked across the room, and she was just licking the like pamphlet, like the program for the award show, just to see what it tastes like. And I started laughing, and I just started like thanking her and then my wife. And the next thing I know, I was just crying.
Oh.
Yeah, I was thanked her, my wife, my mom, and like the women in my life who've supported me and made like literally made this book possible to write. And I just started crying.
Oh, okay, that's beautiful. And with that, we will go to our postscript segment.
Let's do it.
First of all, what's next for you? Can you share anything you're working on and any bucket list writing goals?
Yeah, I'm working on a feature version of the short documentary that came out in the fall called The Last Baron, which is about a rogue burger chain called Burger Baron and how it became kind of a pathway to the immigrant dream. It came out on CBC Gem in September, was quite popular. And, from that response, we started crowdfunding and investing for a feature. And I'm working on that right now. And it should be ready to submit for festivals by the end of August, I guess. And then
cool.
We'll see. Hopefully it'll be in, its first festival in January, hopefully, which also happens to be when Sundance is. So, high bars.
Yeah.
I believe in high bars. So yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. A couple other things here and there, but that's the big one. Like I said, I have one big project at a time. That's my big project.
And what's the bucket list?
Oh, man. Praying to the West kicked my ass, and I don't think I will write another reported nonfiction book for a while. Maybe a few more years. It took so much out of me. But I think I'd like to start writing some more fiction. I have an idea for a novel and about a fourth of it that I completed 3 years ago now. I think it's time to dust that off. Yeah. But actually my dream project, and hopefully I should be able to start this by the end of the summer, is to write a feature screenplay about Frank Lactine, who is a distant cousin of mine, who is the first Arab American movie star and lived a incredibly fascinating life. I learned about him in the process of writing Praying to the West, actually, and wrote kind of the definitive article on him. He was a very, very complicated man, a silent film actor who basically played every ethnicity, always negatively. He kind of sold out racialized people in order to be accepted as an American. And that in itself was a struggle. I mean, he was repeatedly turned down for his American citizenship, and, in the end died like very, very sad and destitute, and never how he actually felt about his choices, about his movie choices. I'll never know. He never spoke about it publicly, as far as I can tell, which is why I think it needs to be fictionalized, because I'll never know what was in his head. But I would love to write that. I would love to write that script.
Fuck, that sounds fascinating. Okay, I'm looking forward to it. What is one piece of writing advice you wish you could give your former self?
It kind of relates to what I just said. The time to write speculative work, that is like work that you're not being paid to write necessarily, is when you're young, or at least before you have a lot of, financial and familial obligations.
Yeah.
Because with the novel and with the script, I mean, these have been bouncing around my head for so long. And I remember even before college, in high school, I would just have like an idea for a movie and I would just go write the script. And I had like 3 screenplays written by the time I went to college. And the idea of doing that now, I'm like, I just don't know how. Like when I got to write a birthday card on spec, I feel like I have to like plan for it. You know what I mean? So
block out my calendar for
yeah,
this, please.
before you're like kind of financially handcuffed to commercial work, even commercial work that you love to do, but like contractually obligated work, try to get the passion projects out then. And also not just get them out, but also like build a routine and a practice of writing for writing's sake, like writing, speculative works, because I never developed that practice. I've been a professional writer since I was fucking young. I've been a professional writer since I was 20. Mm-hmm. And since then, I've just been like really focused on making a career out of it. And, with my gains, building a life for myself. And so, yeah, I never developed that practice.
Fuck, that's good advice. Okay. One tip for writers trying to get a book published.
I think in the book proposal process, try not to get caught up in the comps part of it, which is like the comparative books. This is a nonfiction thing, but I also think that when you're putting together a proposal or a query letter with a novel or a work of fiction, the publishers expect you to compare them to other books and kind of make a case for why the market deserves your book or wants your book. And it is just, the reality is the market is a crapshoot, right? And nobody can really predict what's going to be a successful book or not from comparative titles. And the creative nonfiction writers that I work with at King's University here, this is the thing that causes them the most amount of anxiety. And I'm here to tell you it's probably the least, should I say the least? It's one of the least important parts of your book proposal, in my experience. And I say this because I didn't have comps in my book proposal, and that book sold. So don't get caught up in it. It's good to have, but like, don't stress about it. Don't overthink it.
Yeah. And it's a time suck.
It is.
To go down the rabbit hole of like, what?
It's a suck too.
Okay. What's your all-time favorite piece of your own writing?
Well, there's a comedic investigative piece called "Will the Real Burger Baron Please Stand Up?", which became the movie The Last Baron, which I didn't give you the new title. The feature title is The Lebanese Burger Mafia. And till this day, like I've written maybe 1,000 articles, and till this day, this is the one people want to talk to me about. It's a very Western Canadian thing, this Burger Baron, but it's like, what's the deal with them? Why do they all look different? Why do they have like, they all have like weird different logos, and why are they all Lebanese? And it's such a mystery. And it is. That's why I wrote the piece and tried to find out who the original Baron was, and found out that there were multiple people claiming to be the inventor of this. It's just a really fun and kind of sincere, article about being an immigrant son to like owners of a family restaurant in this diaspora, this like Lebanese diaspora in Alberta, with a burger chain at the center of it.
Oh, I love knowing that that's part of the evolution of The Last Baron and now your feature. That's so cool. I am kind of obsessed with iterating on work in that way, where it's like one form and then it, turns into something else and something else.
I love it. I do this all the time. My other documentary, Digging in the Dirt, which is about mental health and suicides in the Alberta oil and gas industry, I wrote 3 articles on that topic before that documentary was developed. And it was developed kind of the combination of two iterations, because my co-director, Dylan Reese Howard, had made unbeknownst to me, he'd written and directed a scripted short film about the same topic, about like an oil worker who was becoming more and more desperate and hopeless. And after he read one of my articles and he told me about his movie, and we're like, well, there's something
Synergies,
here.
yeah.
So.
Oh my God, I love that. Okay. Well, this has been fantastic.
This has been great. Thank you. This is so fun.
Everyone should check out Pandemic University, which is how we know each other. And I've taught a couple classes for you through Pandemic University. And how else can listeners connect with you online?
You can connect with me on MSN Messenger. I'm just joking. Follow me on Twitter. Twitter's the best one. It's Omar Mouallem. I'm sure the spelling of my last name will be in the show notes.
Yes. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you. This has been amazing. And the wrap, chef's kiss.
God, I already regret this.
So that is it for this edition of The Bleeders. Thanks again to Omar. What a fun interview. It was so great to get to know more about this aspect of his multifaceted career. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Bleeders. Writing is so much better with friends. I'm your host, Courtney Kosak, and hey, let's connect on social media. I am at Courtney Kosak. Last name is Kosak on Twitter and Instagram. And make sure you're signed up for the Bleeders Companion Substack for all kinds of newsletter exclusives. There's so much good stuff that I send out to my free list, and I actually just launched a paid subscription with some extra goodies where I take you behind the scenes of all my best bylines. I published a post about my return to stand-up comedy and how I got ready to crush my showcase. I wrote about MFAs and whether or not I think it is worth it. I also did one of my favorite workshops I've ever taught. It's a manifestation workshop that I did for the new year, but it's really good any time of the year. So there's so much good stuff for free subscribers and even more for paid subscribers. And there is a link in the description for that. And join me again next time for another all new episode. In the meantime, happy bleeding.